And now for the riveting end in part 3 of the Ypsilanti Ripper. Welcome. What is that? To Michigan's Legends and Haunts.
Warning. The following content contains graphic descriptions of actual events. Listener discretion is advised.
So can we just take a moment to give Tony Ramos a shout out for his voiceover there for the explicit content warning? He did great. Great job, Tony. Thank you very much for your help. So we are into part 3 and the last little bit here. Actually, it's quite a bit still. This episode's going to be relatively long. Still a lot to talk about. The co-ed killer, the Ypsilanti Ripper, John Collins, the Michigan murderer. How many other names does this guy have?
I don't know, but when you Google like murders or Michigan crime, like that's it. It's all him.
First one.
It's all him. Yeah. It's actually relatively hard to find murders in Michigan on Google without like just reading about this guy. Like there's nothing else. It's just all about him.
Well, this was probably the biggest thing that ever happened in Michigan, honestly.
Yeah.
As far as like murders and stuff.
Yeah. Yeah.
So this is really where he got sloppy.
Yeah. Hold on one second.
Sure.
Oh, why is he called the co-ed killer?
Because he was killing all mostly college age women.
Oh, yes. Except for the 13-year-old.
Yeah. Yeah. And the 16-year-old.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I think maybe he was just looking for something at that point and maybe steered away from the college a little bit because, that's what...
Gotta throw him off.
Right.
Gotta throw him off.
Man. Okay.
Yet
Continue.
everything he did connected everything.
Right.
So
yes.
I don't know what the point was.
I know.
So the final murder linked to the Ypsilanti Ripper in this series of gruesome deaths was 18-year-old Karen Sue Beineman. She was an Eastern Michigan University student, and she was last seen alive on July 23rd of 1969. It was her roommate, Sherry Green, that reported her missing when she failed to show back up to the dorm after curfew. During questioning, it was determined that Karen was last seen just after noon, heading downtown to a wig shop. Was that a big thing in the 60s? Like women wearing wigs?
I don't know. I was wondering that because they were just like nonchalantly buying
wigs.
I mean, people wear wigs now. Shit, a lot of people wear wigs now, but I don't know. I didn't really know that it was just like I can't just like stroll downtown and go to a wig shop. No. Like I gotta find one and like make an appointment or go to the mall. I guess there's probably some there, but I don't know.
Maybe it was. Maybe that was just a thing.
Yeah.
So here's where stuff kind of starts kind of going all over the place, and the stories go all over the place, and there are different like timeline lapses and different things like that in the research. So 3 days after she disappeared, obviously this is still straight line here, but 3 days after she disappeared, her naked body was discovered in a wooded area along the Huron River Parkway. Following the same as the previous girls, her face and body had been brutally beaten, with some of the lacerations being so severe, sections of her skin needed to be removed to expose the deeper tissues. Again, her head and face injuries were caused by a heavy blunt object, and she was also forced to swallow a caustic substance, and her neck, shoulders, breasts, and nipples had also been burned with the same substance. She also had a piece of cloth stuffed in her throat to muffle her screaming during her torture. Official cause of death for Karen was strangulation. However, had she not been, the extensive head injuries would have proven to be fatal anyway. Further forensic examination determined that she had been raped prior to being murdered, and that her torn panties had been forcefully placed inside of her vagina. The panties, however, finally gave investigators a clue. Semen and hair clippings were found, and the hair, being blonde when the victim had brown hair, did not belong to her.
I don't know what to say.
Okay, you were inhaling, so I was like, you got something to say?
I have a lot in my head, but I'm also like speechless. I didn't know about the substance that was all over. I didn't know about that.
Is it wrong that I'm curious what it was? Because that's all I found was it was a caustic substance.
What it was. I'm just glad that this was the final murder, because he was starting to do pretty awful things. It wasn't just killing. It was torture, like gruesome torture. That's horrible.
And he wasn't going to stop.
No.
Why would he? He wasn't getting caught yet. He probably would have continued on had this not been like
right
what did him in. So this is where the police, unfortunately, this is the point where the police started getting smart. Unfortunately, it had to come to this. So what they had to do was keep in mind that the killer always seemed to return to the scene where his victims' bodies were discovered. Police successfully ordered a news blackout when it came to the discovery of the latest victim, and Karen's body was replaced with a mannequin, and the area was surrounded by undercover officers around the clock. At approximately 2 a.m. the next morning, a young man was seen running from the area. An officer who had seen him attempted to radio ahead to his partners, but his radio was rendered inoperable by a heavy storm that was hitting the area.
The officer actually saw John running away from the body. He managed to sneak up onto the mannequin and realize that it wasn't his victim and then take off.
Right.
And the cop missed all of that. He didn't see him until he was away from the body, taking off in the storm.
Right.
I don't know what he was looking at, but like, what the fuck?
Yeah.
Like, if he had noticed him just a little bit earlier, he could have got him.
Right.
That's shitty.
Yeah.
Like, you're sitting there on fucking 24-hour surveillance. You couldn't, like, watch what you're...
Yeah.
like,
what you're supposed to be watching.
Right. Oh, man.
So, it was at this point that investigators decided to question the owner of the wig shop that Karen was said to have stopped at. In their questioning, Diana Ghosh, she remembered Karen and said that she pulled up with a young man with short, side-parted dark hair on a blue motorcycle, later to be described as a Triumph Bonneville. She also stated that Karen made it a point for her to observe the guy that she was with. Evidently, she stated, quote, "I've got to be either the bravest or the dumbest girl alive because I've just accepted a ride from this guy."
Well.
End quote. The description of the guy Karen had been seen with last was heard by an officer by the name of Larry Mathewson. He believed that the person that was described was none other than John Norman Collins, who was previously questioned by the police.
Yes.
Larry. Yep. Oh, we're on to something now. Larry questioned John on July 25th about his whereabouts from 2 days earlier. He admitted that he had been riding around town on his Triumph Bonneville and ran into a former girlfriend and stopped to talk to her.
An alibi that he created just in order to have an alibi.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. That wasn't by accident.
So, but evidently the former girlfriend was able to provide Larry with 2 recent photos of John, and when shown to the wig shop owner, she was able to confirm that he was the guy that Karen was with. So, I guess John was known around town to be a motorcycle enthusiast, and he held down a part-time job at a business that manufactured brakes and was majoring in elementary education. Prior to being an Eastern Michigan student, he was known for being an honor student and football co-captain at his high school. So, goes back to what you were saying earlier. Model student, did a lot of extracurriculars. He was charismatic. He was personable. He was friendly. He was seemingly the perfect person to be friends with.
Right.
So, I found this really interesting because this is an excerpt of a paper written by John.
I saw this
while he was at Eastern, and I just find it really interesting and really ties into everything. So it says, quote, "If a person wants something, he alone is the deciding factor of whether or not to take it, regardless of what society thinks is right or wrong. If a person holds a gun on somebody, it's up to him to decide whether to take the other's life or not. The point is, it's not society's judgment that's important, but the individual's own choice of will and intellect."
I think that's a common way of thinking for us. Well, somebody like him.
Yeah, if you want it, take it.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And I'm sure that's, after realizing who this killer is, it's so obvious. Like, all of these things just make sense. I mean, he killed animals. He says things like that. That's crazy.
It just, it makes you at the end kind of just, you want to like smack yourself and be like, wow,
right.
I was blind.
Yeah. I'm sure they did.
So John had made a name for himself among his fellow students as a habitual thief, like you said earlier, who had once been evicted from a frat house for stealing from his roommates.
Right.
Women he had dated had described him as an aggressive, short-tempered, oversexed individual who had occasionally engaged in violence against women, even raping one.
Oh, wow. I didn't know that.
Several of John's female acquaintances had said that he would become enraged when finding out that a woman was on her period. When police questioned John's coworkers, they learned that he took delight in describing, in detail, the injuries inflicted on each of the victims of the killer.
I have that written down too.
Yeah.
He would talk about this with his coworkers with details that he claimed to know because his uncle was a police officer.
Yeah, and his uncle would later deny ever sharing the details of the murders with his nephew.
That's so sloppy.
It's sloppy, but it's so... Okay, now I feel like I'm getting into his brain.
See, he's bragging about it to these people.
Right.
Without them knowing that it was like, he's actually bragging. Like, he's like, this happened and that happened.
Mm-hmm.
And he made them uncomfortable with it. And he liked watching them be uncomfortable about it. And he felt like he was on top of the world because he actually did all those things. Like, that's so messed up.
Mm-hmm. Oh, it's so good at the same time, though. He's leaving these little breadcrumbs.
I know. And it's like, it seems like somebody would just be like, wow, this guy's really messed up. Mm-hmm. Like, he's way too interested in these things.
You would think.
I don't know. We're sitting here talking about it too. So, like, well, these guys are really into this. I don't know.
Man, I wish we could have made a trip up to Marquette Prison. Had a little one-on-one.
No.
Had a little interview.
Pass.
Yeah.
No. It's not that far.
Yeah, you'd be fine. You just sit on the other side of the glass and he can't hurt you. You just tell him you're on your period. And then
Oh my God.
he won't touch you. Or he'll jam a stick 8 inches into your vagina. Either way. So, sorry. This is not a laughing matter.
No.
But gotta lighten things up a little. So, investigators would eventually discover that John even lived near or had been acquainted with every single one of the victims. The owner of the wig shop was asked to identify the person she saw with Karen on July 23rd and was able to pick John out of a lineup immediately. And 3 young women came forward to say that on that same day, John attempted to get them to take a ride on his motorcycle. It was on July 27th that police arrived at John's apartment on Emmett Street. He protested his innocence and stated repeatedly that eyewitness identification of him was an error. However, he refused to take a polygraph test. The following evening, John's roommate saw John come out of his bedroom carrying a box that was partially covered by a blanket. As the roommate opened the door for him, he observed the contents of the box: a purple woman's shoe, rolled up jean-type material, and a burlap purse. Later that evening, John told the roommate simply that he had to get rid of the box and its contents.
That's really unfortunate.
Oh, that he had a chance to get rid of it?
Yeah.
I was like, it's unfortunate that... What?
That he got rid of the evidence. That's what. If he hadn't been questioned by the police, if they would have not given him the details like they gave him and not scared him into doing that, they should have gotten a warrant, which they easily could have done, which they were working on. And they just went there to question him and said too much and gave him a chance to get rid of everything.
Right.
That's unfortunate.
So, things get juicier here. John's uncle David, sergeant on the police force, as we mentioned earlier, was out of town on vacation when Karen's body was discovered. The only person who was given access to his home while he was gone was John, who was taking care of the family's German Shepherd. When the family returned home, they noticed a few things were out of place in the home and that a few items were missing, including a bottle of ammonia, washing powder, and a can of black spray paint. They also found paint marks on the floor of the basement. This is 100% where he fucked up.
Yeah.
Yeah. The same day, David was informed that John was a suspect in the case and was provided all of the circumstantial evidence that he was up against. While acknowledging that the evidence was compelling, he did not let officers know about the missing items nor the paint marks on the basement floor. The next morning, David scraped away some of the paint on the floor to find what he believed to be blood and then immediately reported his findings to his colleagues. This began intense forensic investigation on the home, and they would later discover that the stains were actually that of varnish, not blood. Investigators also discovered hair clippings next to the washing machine, which David informed them that his wife regularly cut the children's hair in the basement. At this point, David did not know about the hair found in Karen's panties. At the end of the search, 9 blood stains were eventually discovered in the basement, type A blood, that of Karen Sue Beineman. Eventually, the hairs discovered in the basement would also prove to be an exact match to those found in her panties as well. With the discovery of this new evidence, authorities began questioning the neighbors, and more evidence began to surface. One neighbor witnessed John leaving the home one night with a large box of laundry detergent, and another had heard the muffled screams of a young female coming from the home the evening that Karen disappeared. Due to this new evidence, John was arrested and his apartment was searched thoroughly. Despite the efforts of the authorities, no incriminating evidence was found in the apartment. I have a question here. If you hear The screams of anybody, male, female, anybody coming from a house. Why are you not calling the police?
Why? That's a good point.
I don't care if I know what's going on in that house or not. I'm going to call the police.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. I'm not like a nosy neighbor, but if I hear something going on.
Right, muffled screaming.
Yeah, come on.
When I'm sure they probably knew they were out of town too.
Right. Well, yeah.
Maybe not, but
maybe
like
not.
You hear muffled screaming from your neighbor's house.
Right.
I would absolutely call the police.
Right. 2, can we talk about how fucked up it is that he took hair clippings from his cousin's hair that was on the floor and just sprinkled them like Salt Bae into her panties?
That's really weird.
Now,
was he trying to frame some?
I think he was trying to frame his uncle, honestly.
Yeah.
Keep him off his tail. But that's just a theory. There's nothing that says that.
Yeah.
But that would make sense.
Yeah.
So.
Can you imagine learning that somebody was murdered like that in your basement?
I'd
by
move
your
out.
Fucking relative too?
I'd move out. I'd have to.
Yeah. No, I couldn't live that way. I couldn't just not think about it all the time. I'd have to leave.
So I'm skipping ahead a little bit because I'm not going to go through the whole trial and all that because we know it's pretty standard trial stuff unless you have something that I didn't see. No. It's pretty standard. There's an arraignment, there's a trial, there's a pre-trial, there's this, that, and the other. So I'm just going to skip ahead. So I'll give you little tidbits here and there, but I'm not going to...
Quick summary.
Yeah, I'm not going to go into all the details. So on August 1st, 1969, John Norman Collins was formally arraigned for the murder of Karen Sue Beineman and was held without bond. Now, in early August, Michigan police were contacted by another department that operated out of Salinas, California. They stated they had reason to believe that a Michigan resident by the name of John might have been responsible for the death of a 17-year-old girl by the name of Roxy Phillips. In review of the circumstances surrounding the girl's death, they found that Roxy had developed a relationship with an Eastern Michigan University student named John, who reportedly drove a silver gray Oldsmobile Cutlass and was temporarily living with a friend in a camper. Police discovered in their investigation that John, along with his former roommate Andrew, traveled to Monterey in John's Oldsmobile Cutlass, which towed a camper trailer that they had rented under false names and paid for the vacation with a stolen check. Roxy's body was found on July 13th, as with the victims in Michigan, nude, battered, and was strangled to death with her dress. Due to the evidence, police in both Michigan and California decided that the connections were too strong to not be related killings. An arrest warrant was put out for Andrew, and he was located in Phoenix, Arizona on August 6th. There was no hard evidence that would ever surface connecting him to the murders. But in April of 1970, a formal indictment was served against John for the first-degree murder of Roxy. So, moving into the middle of August here, August 14th, 1969, John was formally ordered to stand trial for the murder of Karen Sue Beineman. It wasn't until June 2nd, 1970, that the formal trial for the murder of Karen began in Washtenaw County. Throughout the trial, 47 witnesses were called to testify against John. In the end, the jury would deliberate for 27 hours over the course of 3 days. It wasn't until August 19th, 1970, that John Norman Collins was found guilty of first-degree murder of Karen Sue Beineman. He was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole on August 28th, 1970. And at the end of the trial, John gave the following speech.
I have two things to say. I think they conscientiously tried to give me a fair trial. The jury did not take its task lightly, but I think things were blown out of proportion. The circumstances surrounding this case prevented me from getting a fair trial. It was a travesty of justice that took place in this courtroom. I hope someday it will be corrected. Second, I never knew a girl named Karen Sue Beineman. I never took her to my uncle's home. I never took her life.
And to this day, John continues to serve his life sentence at the Marquette prison. So it still blows my mind that he only officially got charged with murder for Karen Sue Beineman, when they very clearly knew that the rest of these were connected to everything.
Yep. Everything was connected. He left clues. I mean, I think they just gave up on the rest because, you know, he's already in jail. He's already there for life, so why worry about the rest, I guess. I mean,
yeah, but imagine the families of those people.
I'm not saying it's right.
No.
He should still be held, you know, for doing those things. He should be known to be the person that, I mean, he is known to be the person that killed those people, but he wasn't tried for it. It's not like he was ever gonna, he still denies it, right? So even to the one that they had hard evidence for, but he got rid of the evidence for everything else.
Absolutely the worst murder spree we've had in this state, at least up to this point that I found.
Yeah.
And the most interesting too, at the same time.
It's interesting to read about it because of all the things he did and the way that he did everything with his, like, going back to the scene and his weird, creepy obsessions. Like, it's interesting. Yes. It's awful, but
it's clever.
Yeah, right.
You have to give him some credit because it was clever.
Yeah.
And it was,
And the fact that he didn't get tried for everything else.
Right.
I mean, he's still in prison, but I bet that he is still proud of, you know, everything that he did. And the way that he probably still thinks he got away with everything else that he did because, you know, I mean, yeah, he's in prison, but.
For one.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
They just let him go on the other 6.
I mean, he's not going to get much worse because they can't kill him.
No, Michigan does not offer the death penalty.
Right.
Unfortunately. Letting a little bit of my bias out there. But, you know, in a state that does have the death penalty still, he would have.
Oh, absolutely.
He would have faced it, you know. Yeah. I don't know what's worse, just getting put to death or just being in prison the rest of your life.
I don't know.
Because you still got to wait years before they put you to death. So there's a lot of waiting there.
And he was only 23 years old.
Fucked his whole life.
That's insane.
Fucked his entire life.
Thank God they got him.
Right.
You know, but damn.
I'm going to look something up. I want to see if he's listed on like Otis or something. No, I mean, yeah, I hate to say it, But yes, I give him points for just how fucking clever he was. But
until the end.
And it's almost like he wanted to get caught at that point. Or do you think he maybe just...
He offered to house sit for his uncle.
Yeah.
I think his intention the whole time was to use that as a space to murder somebody. And that is the worst idea in the world. Like, why would you even think that's a good plan? Because then you have to clean up a huge mess in a police officer's house, in your family's house.
Right.
That was his downfall.
Yeah, that was 100% his downfall. So it begs the question, did he actually get sloppy? Did he get too cocky? Or was it to a point where he wanted to get caught? I don't know. But I did find him on Otis.
Oh my gosh.
That's him.
Ew.
I'll post it up on our Instagram. John Norman Collins. He is 72 years old now. So he was put away in what, 1970, right?
Yep.
So, yeah, he was 23 years old. And he's 72 years old now.
I feel like at that point, you should... I would prefer a death penalty, I think. Why would you, like, he's lived for so fucking long.
More than half his life in prison.
Right.
Yeah.
Like, what the hell? That sucks. He's
Now-
probably wishing he, like, lived in a different state.
Right. Right.
I would.
In your research, did you find what his, because you said his mom was married to his his biological dad at first, right?
Yeah.
Did you happen to find his name? His, like, last name?
I don't think so.
Because the part in the Too Long Didn't Listen portion of part 1,
Yeah.
in the very beginning, I said I was going to skip the fact that I found that he went by the name John Norman Chapman.
Oh, yeah.
So alias is under here, John Chapman.
Oh, okay.
So I'm wondering if his biological dad's last name was Chapman.
Probably. You know what? I think I did see it because
he ended up taking his stepdad's last name, right?
yes,
Okay.
he got adopted and he was born as something else. I think what I saw and read about was, I think that is it. He when he was really little, I think he wasn't adopted till he was like a few years old, or maybe later.
Okay.
I don't know, but he was a different he had a different name.
He was a
at
different
first.
person?
No,
All right.
he had a different name when he was born, so that's probably it.
Okay.
I can't remember off the top of my head what his dad's name was, but
Okay. So that makes sense.
yeah.
All right. Man. The Ypsi Ripper, Michigan murderer, the co-ed killer, John Norman Chapman, John Norman Collins. Also, his Otis profile said he also had the name alias of Waterhead, which I
Okay.
don't really know. Or did it say Waterhead? Hold on, let me double check that. Yeah, Waterhead. I don't know. I don't know what that is.
Okay.
What a wild ride,
Yeah.
man.
I don't have any. I don't know what else to say.
I don't either.
It's sad.
It is.
It's really sad, and it's really messed up.
Yeah. Especially the two, like, I'm not discounting the others, but the two girls that had shit, like, just shoved inside them.
End.
Man.
That's
Just-
why I said I'm glad he got caught
Yeah.
when he did.
Just
'cause-
torturing and torturing and torturing these women.
Yeah.
It's upsetting.
I know when you were reading that all off, I was like, it was different than reading it myself. Like
Yeah.
hearing you say it out loud, I'm like, I'm like picturing it and not wanting
Mhm.
to. And I just can't imagine.
You're putting yourself in those
Yeah.
girls' shoes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's terrible.
Stop.
And I can't believe that he was so young.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know. My brother is that age. And I think about
Right.
that and I'm like, what?
Imagine him. Imagine your brother going on a killing spree.
No. See, that's just so crazy to me. Like, this 20-year-old kid is just murdering women. That's nuts.
We just talked about this the other day, like the progression of criminals.
Yeah.
And how it happens. Like we were talking about, I believe it was Eileen Warnos for Ashley's new podcast that's coming out soon called Murder in the Thirst. And how she started out with petty crimes. And it just kind of escalated. And then she ended up murdering like 6 or 7 guys.
Yeah. Well, when you do one small thing, it leads to another, maybe another small thing that leads to a little bit bigger thing. And then you end up in a big ass hole that you dug for yourself.
It kind of goes back to what we said in the OCCK episode. It's like you keep winning.
Yeah.
And you want to keep winning and keep winning. So you make sure that you keep winning. All right. Well, join us next week for 2 more new episodes. Thanks for listening.